Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Kuzma. I'm flying solo once again with the JPP, and in case you missed it last time, this is the second such edition of a little subset, a little different genre here to get us through the offseason. The JPP, if you did miss, it stands for Joe's Pet Peeves, and since that's me, it means my pet peeves. And if you happen to overlook it just because of the title, I was talking about getting politics out of sports. Folks, I didn't take any side. There's no left, right, upside down, or backwards to it. There's no red, blue, yellow, green, or orange. I just stayed straight down the middle, just gave a very general overview of what I feel is, well, just quite frankly, somebody should just keep some opinions to themselves. So I'm dealing with sports today, and I'm dealing with the second edition of the JPP. What really gets under my skin, what really, well, for those of you Family Guy viewers out there, what really grinds my gears, and that's some of the fans out here, the Steelers fans that would be, sometimes I call them yinzers because they just, and let's give a little bit of background to that term. I don't mean it to be derogatory. Actually, I kind of refer to myself as a yinzer every now and then. But what I always mean by yinzers are going to yins is we're always going to complain. We're spoiled about our Steelers teams. And to that degree, I want to ask Steelers Nation, because I get a lot of feedback whenever we're talking about it, especially this time of the year. We've had a lot to talk about. Backup quarterbacks. I don't get why people get so bent out of shape over backup quarterbacks, and I get particularly upset that people just think you could find one of these guys in the draft. Now, if you missed one of the shows the other day, myself and Brian Roach, regular, just plain old edition of the Steel City Underground Podcast, talking about the free agent quarterbacks that are available to possibly be a backup in Pittsburgh. Of course, we also mentioned in the same breath that Kevin Colbert, in his press conference last week, would like to bring Landry Jones back. In quote, he said, "I'd like to keep Landry Jones in the mix." So straight from the horse's mouth, our general manager feels Landry should be back. A lot of people, that makes them cringe, and I don't understand why. We got a lot of fans that say, well, we should have drafted this guy, or we should take a guy in the first round. We should, Paxton Lynch was a big example last year. Well, we're going to talk about Paxton here in a few moments. There's a lot of guys that say, hey, we could get somebody in the middle rounds. Well, what do you think Landry Jones came from? Landry Jones was a fourth-round pick in 2013. And I'm going to, if you didn't see this article over on Steel City Underground, I actually have a chart, and it's a pretty lengthy article too, so I understand, you know what, sometimes we just don't have time to read and look at every single thing that's on the internet. You don't hurt my feelings by doing so, because you know what, you're here listening to me right now, and I appreciate that just as much. But this is a nice little visual example to just kick you over to the website and look for this. It's an article entitled Picks Taken Since Landry Jones was drafted Makes a Case for Keeping Him. And what this really means is I'm going to go through the 2013 draft class. I'm going to go through every pick that was taken, every quarterback pick that was taken in that year and following through last season, through the 2016 NFL draft. And I'm just going to show, and I'm also going to compare and contrast that to some of the picks the Steelers made. And I want to ask the fans if they would rather have somebody else, because this is usually where this is the tipping point. Now, I want everybody to understand a few base rules here. And this is for regular listeners who have heard me say this before. Landry Jones is not Ben Roethlisberger. Nobody is Ben Roethlisberger. There are lots of people still trying to draft a Ben Roethlisberger for their team because there are not enough starting quarterbacks to go around to all 32 teams in the NFL. The Cleveland Browns went through how many of them last year? And they draft a guy like every year, every other year. They're probably going to draft a guy this year again. They just took Cody Kessler, and you remember for many years, and you've seen the famous jersey that has the names going down the back of it. The Brandon Whedons of the world, the Brady Quinns, I mean, they had Hoyer there as a free agent. They've Johnny Manziel, who could forget that. But I mean, that's just Cleveland. We're not talking about the Raiders. Look how long it took them to get Derek Carr. Do you think teams in our own division, now obviously the Ravens are sold on Joe Flacco, and they've won a Super Bowl with him, but how many of us don't think that Joe Flacco is an elite quarterback? I mean, he was a first-round draft pick. That's what it took in order to get that guy. Andy Dalton, another guy. Do you think he is an elite quarterback? That's in our own division. You look around and you see the Bills don't have a guy. You see the Miami Dolphins. Are they really sold on Ryan Tannehill? I mean, they give him a contract. They gave Dalton a contract. Do you think that's the guy? The Redskins, all this turmoil with Kirk Cousins. And before Kirk Cousins, in the same year, they took RG3. They took 2 quarterbacks in the same draft trying to get it right, and their situation still is not fixed. So when someone tells me that the Steelers absolutely must draft a draft pick, and me and Brian are going to talk about that in the next episode, so I don't want to get into the meat of why the Steelers should maybe be a little more patient, not to mention Brian has some opinions about this year's draft class as well, for another reason to wait. But let's take a look at the past and see the type of value maybe that would have gotten for some of these picks. Now, 2013, just to go down memory lane, is the year the Steelers took Jarvis Jones, number 17 overall. 1 pick after the Buffalo Bills went after E.J. Manuel. E.J. Manuel was meant to be their guy. And then, of course, they bet the farm on Sammy Watkins and haven't had as many high-quality picks since in order to use those. And, of course, they traded with the Browns, too, which I should mention it didn't work out for Cleveland as much. But if you look at this, E.J. Manuel was the only guy taken in the first round. E.J. Manuel, 6-11 as a starting quarterback. He started 17 games. He's played in 29 of them. 58.32 completion percentage. So he's under 60%. Some of these decimals are really hard to get across to you guys over a radio style broadcast. So I'm just going to try and keep it to over or under 60% or round off some of these numbers. 3,500 yards or so. He's actually one of the few guys that's thrown more touchdowns than interceptions. So let me rifle down here because he wouldn't have been available. So in order to take a quarterback this year other than Landry Jones, this is who you have to give up. So you have to give up Jarvis Jones to go after Geno Smith, who went 39th overall in the second round. But guess who went 9 picks later? 9 picks later, Le'Veon Bell is chosen by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if you take Jarvis Jones in the first round, you mean to tell me you would have rather had Geno Smith, who's now going to be a free agent? How would you feel about that? Would you feel better about trying to franchise tag or re-sign Le'Veon Bell or Geno Smith? And how would the Steelers team look without Le'Veon Bell and having Geno Smith ride the bench as Ben Roethlisberger's heir? Even though Ben Roethlisberger is like 34, he's about to be, I think, 35 in May. He's about the same age as I am. And Ben is actually signed through 2020. And put him at about 38 years of age. Everyone always wants to put him off the pasture. Guys, he's still got, guys and girls, I should say, he's still got 2017, 2018, and 2019 left on his contract before he becomes a free agent. And you see the way some of these guys are playing at an older age. He may be on a year-to-year after that, too. So even taking someone now would put you in that same situation of, well, draft picks aren't a sure deal. So you may think this is a Geno Smith, the next best things since sliced bread. And that's the way he was advertised. And I remember it was a real big deal that he stuck around even in the green room waiting for his name to be called at 39. A lot of people thought he was going to be chosen in the first round, and he didn't go there. And maybe a lot of people would feel, oh, we could get Geno Smith and we have the next guy for Ben Roethlisberger. Well, no, because if we would have done that, you would have lost on Le'Veon Bell. You would have missed out on the best running back in football. And then, now what would you do? You're just wasted one or a wasted 2 on a quarterback that's not even going to be on the team, because I don't think Geno Smith's going to be with the Jets. And if he were here in Pittsburgh, I don't think they're going to spend the money for him unless, of course, it's like a Landry Jones situation. I think Landry Jones offers a nice cost-to-benefit ratio. And I want to correct something me and Brian said the other day. Chase Daniel getting a deal with the Eagles last year, moving from the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to talk about this with Brian, but just a real quick retraction. I'm going to bring it up again in the next episode. I had said he got a 3-year, $12 million deal. The $12 million is the guaranteed money. He actually got a $21 million deal. So, wow. Yeah, wowzers. So, Landry Jones isn't getting paid that kind of money, but there's some comparative statistics there to go around, too. So, they have the same record and practically identical. I mean, Chase Daniel played in like 4 games and got $21 million, which is insane. So, obviously, Geno Smith has a little more experience than that, but that's about what Geno Smith would have as well if he were sitting riding the pine in Pittsburgh. You have to kind of consider maybe they wouldn't be playing the rookie. They would have maybe still signed, the Steelers would have signed Michael Vick in an emergency case to be a backup as well. And then you might end up losing Geno Smith to a 3-year, $21 million deal somewhere, which would be insane. The Steelers aren't going to pay that for a backup quarterback, especially not now that they finally got out from all their cap woes, and they got a lot of mouths to feed right now. They've got to do deals with Antonio Brown. They got to do a deal with Bell. We're looking towards the future with Ryan Shazier and Stephon Tuitt as well. They're trying to get a long-term deal done with Alejandro Villanueva, the left tackle. There's just not enough money to go around for a subpar backup quarterback that you would have burned a pick on. Now, you keep going forward and looking at this 2013 draft, and Mike Glennon is a guy that's up for free agency as well. He was taken in the 3rd round, number 73. He's actually taken several picks before the Steelers selected 79 and get Marcus Wheaton. I'm going to call that basically a push because I'm going to tell you what, Wheaton's done a lot of good things here in Pittsburgh. Can you imagine not having him there? I don't know who the other replacement would have been. He may not last. He may not be here for the 2017 season, but regardless, he still gave you 47 games and 22 starts. Mike Glennon, however, appeared in 21 with a 5-13 record. He's also under a 60% completion, about 59%, 4,100 yards, 30 to 15 TD to interception ratio. And you go into the 4th round. These are the guys that are taken ahead of. Well, these two are taken ahead of Shamarko Thomas. It's Matt Barkley, who's about to be a free agent with the Bears, 1-5 as a starter, under 60% completion percentage on 266 attempts, of course. I hadn't gotten into attempts yet, but some of these guys have not even attempted passes in the NFL yet. So Barkley, about 1,900 yards. He has thrown 18 interceptions to 8 touchdowns, 10 more picks than anybody else, 10 more picks than he did touchdowns. So Ryan Nassib has not seen any time. He's only attempted 10 passes in the league. Shamarko Thomas goes off the board at 111. Tyler Wilson is next, and Tyler Wilson isn't even in the NFL anymore. He is taken by Oakland ahead, 3 picks ahead of Landry Jones, who I should remind everyone, 2-2 official record. He does have above 60% career completion percentage at 60.28. He's thrown for over 1,000 yards with a 7 touchdown to 6 interception ratio. The Steelers then take a few picks. Terry Hawthorne goes in the 5th. Justin Brown goes in the 6th. Okay, those didn't pan out. You're taking flyers. You get Vince Williams in the 6th round. Would you have rather had one of these? Maybe you would have ahead of Shamarko Thomas, but everyone thought Shamarko Thomas was the guy that's going to stand in for Troy Polamalu, right? So hindsight always can't be 20/20 on these things. And then, of course, they finish out the draft with Nicholas Williams. The other guys who end up getting drafted, other quarterbacks, Brad Sorensen, no longer in the league, Zach Dysert, who got drafted by the Broncos, currently with the Cardinals, he's still in the league. He's with the Cardinals, but he's never thrown a pass in the regular season. B.J. Daniels and Sean Renfree, all gone. You bump over to 2014. The number 3 pick overall, Blake Bortles, wouldn't have been on the board. You know who would have been on the board when the Steelers pick at 15 in the 2014 NFL Draft? That would have been Johnny Manziel or Teddy Bridgewater or Derek Carr. But you would have had to give up Ryan Shazier to get one of those guys. And Manziel's not even in the league. It's just a head case and a train wreck. Bridgewater blew out his knee so bad, tragic accident, could have happened in Pittsburgh, may not have. But if he's there practicing, he could miss 2 straight seasons. I'm hearing he may not even be ready for 2017. And he missed the entire 2016 season, and that team had to go and pony up and trade to get Sam Bradford as an emergency plan. I don't like that type of backup situation, if you ask me. Derek Carr, believe it or not, Derek Carr, 81 touchdowns to 31 interceptions, pretty good, but he still doesn't have a winning record, and a team around him is pretty lousy, but he's a pinch above 60% completion percentage, almost 61. He's already thrown for 11,000 yards. Probably going to be the best in this class. Although Blake Bortles not absolutely terrible either. Blake Bortles in the same territory has thrown for over 11,000 with a 69-51 ratio. But he's only won 11 games. Some of that's the team that's around him. But we're talking backup quarterbacks because then these guys are going to supplant Ben unless Ben's majorly injured. Would you give up Ryan Shazier for any of these guys? Or maybe Stephon Tuitt, who goes in the second round. He goes, I don't know, about 20 picks ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo, who New England takes at 62. Tuitt goes at 46. Garoppolo, he's only attempted 94 passes, but everybody wants him. It's not a real big body of work. You know who else didn't have a whole lot of passes and a whole lot of starts and a whole lot of appearances? That would be Brock Osweiler. That really, really confuses me. Garoppolo, maybe it's the team around him. 67% completion percentage, pretty good. 5 TDs, no interceptions. Now, Garoppolo's already off the board when the Steelers take Dre Archer. Another quarterback does not go when they go and take Martavis Bryant. So you could have had, let's say, Logan Thomas or Tom Savage ahead of Dre Archer. You definitely wouldn't take that over Martavis Bryant. I don't know anybody who would. Shaq Richardson gets picked. They could have maybe had Aaron Murray or A.J. McCarron. Now, Murray's a guy that I thought we might target as a backup. We end up with Zach Mettenberger instead as a third-string quarterback. McCarron, he's set to be a free agent. He's getting eyeballs from everyone. But once again, 66% completion percentage. He's attempted 119 passes in the NFL. 854 yards, 6 TDs, 2 picks. These are all regular season numbers, by the way, too, because McCarron did have a playoff appearance. Most of these guys do not have playoff appearances that have been drafted, if they're still around on an NFL roster or had thrown a pass. So Wesley Johnson goes off the board in the 5th to the Steelers. Later on, Zach Mettenberger and David Fales end up going. You know that Mettenberger's already on this team, so we'll see how that ends up working out. Quite honestly, if they would have taken McCarron or Mettenberger over Shaq Richardson or Wesley Johnson, I don't think we would have known the difference, but we see what the Steelers were trying to do. And then you have Jordan Zumwalt, who was a linebacker taken in the 6th round. And we see some 6th-round picks end up panning out to be decent players. I said Vince Williams earlier. We got Latarius Walton, who's doing pretty decent as a defensive tackle, about to enter his 3rd year. And then, of course, Antonio Brown. So you're going to take a flyer on Jordan Zumwalt over Keith Wenning, Taj Boyd, who ended up in Steelers camp a few seasons back, and Garrett Gilbert, who the Rams took. So that wraps the 2014 picks. You get into the 2015 picks, and the first 2 guys off the board overall, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota. We're going to talk what it takes to get those type of picks. Steelers pick at 22. They get Bud Dupree. They come around again before another quarterback is taken. Senquez Golson is their pick. And then Garrett Grayson goes to the New Orleans Saints before the Steelers end up with Sammy Coates. 2 more guys end up going. Sean Mannion, who's thrown all of 13 passes for the Rams. And, he's completed 9 of them. I don't think that really counts. It says 69% completion percentage. He's thrown 13 passes. Some of those could be dump-off passes for all that matters. If you see where I'm heading with some of this, the Steelers don't do too bad with their picks. Now, Bryce Petty ends up going. He is absolutely miserable as a backup. He has 7 picks to 3 touchdowns. He's not going to be a starter. Duran Grant goes after that, then Brett Hundley. Then you get names like Jesse James, L.T. Walton, Anthony Chickillo, Gerard Holloman. So those are 4 Steelers picks before the last quarterback taken in the draft, which is Trevor Siemian in the 7th round, who kind of just ends up there by default, does not have a 60% completion percentage. He's close. He's like 59.5, 3,400 yards, 18 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. You go to last year's draft, a lot of people are looking at Paxton Lynch. You end up getting Artie Burns. You think that was a bigger help to the Steelers, upgrading that secondary last season, as opposed to going after Paxton Lynch, who went a pick later? Or Christian Hackenberg over Sean Davis or Javon Hargrave, who were the next two Steelers picks after that quarterback pick? Of course, the top of the class was Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Neither one of them have shown much of anything. Wentz started out hot, finishes with 7-9 record, 62% of his passes were completed, but 16 to 14 TD to INT ratio. Goff absolutely miserable, 5-7 on that ratio, 54% of his passes completed, 0-7 as a starter, not good. You get behind Hargrave in the third round, and there's some other guys picked like Jacoby Brissett, Cody Kessler. Cody Kessler has actually been pretty solid with the Cleveland Browns, 65% of his passes completed on 195 attempts, 1,300 yards, 6-2 on his ratio. Connor Cook, who struggled in the playoff game with the Raiders, he only attempted 21 regular season passes. He doesn't really have a record. One TD, one pick there for Cook. Before Gerald Hawkins goes in the fourth round, Steelers trying to shore up their backup offensive linemen, their backup tackles. We don't know how that pick's going to end up turning out. A lot of people, this is the one where they really want to throw shade at the Steelers because Dak Prescott goes to the Cowboys, and we see how that turned out. Now, Prescott, the guy doesn't make any mistakes. He has an absurd 67.76 completion percentage. He threw for 3,600 yards, 23 TDs, 4 picks. They protected him quite a bit behind Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, it's what else can you say there as far as 459 pass attempts? That kind of gets up into that range, but he's not a throwing machine. It kind of reminds me of Russell Wilson in much the same way, where they would hand off the beast mode. Don't forget that Dak Prescott had some off-the-field issues before the NFL draft, just leading right into there, that may have spooked some teams, and it obviously caused him to fall into the fourth round, where a team had to take a chance on him. The Cowboys did, and he wasn't even going to play. I mean, they gave Tony Romo this huge contract, and they had another backup quarterback that ends up getting hurt. Dak Prescott ends up stepping in, and the rest is history. So it's a very an unintended sequence of events. Buffalo takes Cardell Jones from Ohio State. He gets to attempt 11 passes last season. He only completes 54.5% of them. Kevin Hogan, who was drafted by the Chiefs, ends up with Cleveland and attempts 26 passes as well. The rest of these guys did not make a roster last year. Nate Sudfeld, Jake Rudick, Brandon Allen, Jeff Driscoll. Then the Steelers take Travis Feeney, and the draft ends with Brandon Dowdy going to Miami, and he has out of the league. I'm sorry, the first four names, Sudfeld, Rudick, Allen, and Driscoll, are actually all still in the league. They've just never attempted a regular season pass, nor has Christian Hackenberg behind, 4 quarterbacks that were on the Jets team at that point. So I think you guys end up seeing the scenario here of what you end up having to do in order to get a halfway decent quarterback. They just don't exist in the middle rounds. And when you say you want a middle round quarterback that you could groom, they already have one with Landry Jones. That's just a matter of fact. And you could have taken somebody else other than Landry Jones, but I don't think it would have panned out any better. We don't know about some of these guys because they never attempted the pass, but just the fact that they didn't even make a team. The Steelers had some patience and worked with Landry Jones. He looked just as shaky his first couple of seasons, pre-seasons. So what's it going to take? It's going to take the Steelers drafting probably higher than 30 in order to get the guy that replaces Ben. And Ben probably will have to not be here anymore because that first-round money, if Ben's still around, they're going to have to pay. They're going to have a fifth-year option. It's worth a lot more money. It's like the equivalent of a franchise tag on a first-round draft pick to get them beyond their 4-year rookie deal. Or they're going to have to, if they end up doing anything, they're going to have to bet the farm. Because the Titans traded the first overall selection to the Rams, and the Browns traded their second overall selection last year to the Eagles. And the Rams, in doing so, they gave Tennessee the top 4 draft picks of 2016, which was a first, 2 second-round picks, and a third-round pick. And then they also gave up their first and third picks for this year. It is just insane. Now, they did get a couple other picks back. They got the first round pick from the Titans, where they took Jared Goff, and they got a 4th and a 6th round pick last year. But man, that is an awful lot of compensation for a rookie that you don't know if he's going to be any good, if that college game is going to translate to the pro game. And, I mean, the Eagles, their trade was their 8th overall. They swapped with Cleveland. They gave Cleveland a 3rd and a 4th, and then also their 1st round for this year and a 2nd round next year. And that was only for that 2nd overall choice, which ends up being Carson Wentz, and a 4th round pick for this year's draft in 2017. So, I mean, that pretty much just leaves the middle rounds. I mean, how many guys in those middle rounds end up being good? I think Dak Prescott's the one that really stands out. Some people want to say Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo was taken a lot higher in the draft than, I mean, he's a 2nd round pick. You don't call that a middle round pick just because he's taken on day 2, folks. I mean, Le'Veon Bell was a 2nd round pick. So if you're going to put that into perspective, if you want to look at this entire list, you can over on Steel City Underground. You'll see a few other statistics here, such as there's only 4 quarterbacks on the entire list of all the guys that were taken, which is 40 quarterbacks since Landry Jones was picked back in the 2013 draft, 115 overall. That does not include Landry Jones. He would be 41 on this list. And only 4 of these quarterbacks actually have a winning record. Garoppolo, not that many games. A.J. McCarron, 2-1. Trevor Siemian, who's actually played a few. I think he's like 8-7. And then, of course, Dak Prescott, 13-3. Some of the interception ratios, almost all of these guys have thrown more interceptions than touchdowns. So all of this is here in the article. It's pretty much a done deal. There aren't very many Tom Brady's, like a 6th round pick, Kurt Warner, that's an undrafted guy, that you're just going to find and are going to, I mean, people don't miss on this stuff often. And when they do, they tend to end up being fools, and there has to be some extraneous circumstances surrounding it, like Kurt Warner ends up getting in. And the same thing with Brady. I mean, Brady was behind Drew Bledsoe. Trent Green was the quarterback ahead of Kurt Warner. And then Kurt Warner even got forced out from Mark Bulger over there with the Rams in St. Louis. And then wound up with the Giants, who took Eli Manning. And then he got bounced around again to the Cardinals, who had, I want to say, like Matt Leinart, who was another one of these USC quarterbacks that was a can't-miss thing. And I mean, you couldn't keep Kurt Warner down, but at the same time, it was like the guys that they kept bringing in. Now, Bulger had a decent career, and Eli Manning, we know where he ended up. It was just nobody was sold on Kurt Warner, and the guy's in the Hall of Fame right now. And that's the way some of that works. Russell Wilson, of course, too, a 3rd-round pick for the Seattle Seahawks. But there's only 11 teams that fielded a signal caller taken out of the 1st round of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL, if you consider 32 of the starting quarterbacks, the majority that played or started games for those teams like Cleveland. You have to go with like Cody Kessler or Josh McCown. I'm trying to think who was there. But 5 of those were picked in the 2nd round. So only 1 was in the 3rd. That was Wilson. And then only the 5 of those 32 starting quarterbacks remaining are guys that weren't taken in on day 1 or day 2. And that is Tom Brady, of course, Dak Prescott in the 4th, Simeon in the 7th, Kirk Cousins in the 4th round, and Ryan Fitzpatrick in the 7th. And I don't know if any of those names seem sexy enough for you to suggest that there is such thing as a value pick. So don't put words in my mouth. Landry Jones is not Ben Roethlisberger. He's not meant to be Ben Roethlisberger's replacement whatsoever. He's a guy that's there, that knows the offense, is capable of winning games when called upon, and not making too many mistakes. So the next time we come around, I'm going to be talking about another backup quarterback, because I went a little too long on my rant, but this is one of my pet peeves, guys. Quarterbacks, not a surefire thing. You could take them in the 1st round, you could take them in the 7th round. Doesn't mean a hill of beans. There's guys that went undrafted like Kurt Warner, but those are more exceptions to the rule many more guys fail than do succeed. So don't think just because you draft somebody that they're going to be the next guy that walks on water, they're going to be Ben's replacement, because you may end up with someone that's not even as good as Landry Jones. Until next time, be safe, be good, and I'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.